Welcome to Agatha Christie She Watched, our spoiler-heavy look at the movie and TV adaptations of the mystery genre's greatest writer. I'm Bill Peschel of Peschel Press, publisher of the annotated novels of Agatha Christie, and today we're talking about betrayed soldiers, betrayed lovers, betrayed immigrants, and betrayed children. It's étaient, also known as They Were 10, the 2020 French miniseries version of And Then There Were None. But first, let me introduce my partner in marriage as well as crime of the fictional kind, Teresa Peschel. Teresa, how you doing today?
Hi, love. Here we are in the little office under the stairs getting ready to talk about, I think this is adaptation number 8 of And Then There Were None. There are going to be 10 in all in the book, but of course we're not going to talk about the ones that we saw months ago or even years ago. So here we are with And Then There Were None. When I first saw the 1945 And Then There Were None, it's an amazing movie, by the way, totally worth seeing, but it is not the novel. It is the play. The play has a different ending in which the two most guilty people, Vera, who murdered the nephew of her lover so that he could inherit, and Philip Lombard, who betrayed his men, a group of men to death in the bush, they turned out to be not guilty. When I saw that, and then I saw numerous other versions, all of which essentially were the stage play. Of course, I had gone back and reread the novel, and I thought, wow, they are never really going to be able to film this. There are two reasons, and the first is that in the novel, but not on the stage play, Vera and none of the other people ever find out who was the puppet master pulling their strings. Also, in the stage play, Vera confronts the puppet master and discovers that it was the judge who was pulling the strings. And, of course, the other thing in the novel is that the police come on at the end in epilogue number 1, and they found the bodies all over the island, and they're trying to put together what happened, and they have no idea, but it's just not clear. And then in epilogue number 2, a message in a bottle is discovered. Well, messages in bottles and police stymied are not very photogenic, and so I didn't really see how they would be able to do the novel. And now I've been proved wrong twice, because they did it in Japanese, which was simply amazing, and now here they've done it again in French, and it works. Vera, or in this case, I should say Nina. I'm going to have to stick with the French names because they made a lot of changes to the characters. This is putting old wine in new bottles. They made a lot of changes to the characters, so you can't match up one for one the way we were able to do with the Japanese version of And Then There Were None. The only person here I can say definitely has a match is Nina for Vera, because she simply refuses to face what it is that she did, which is that she willfully set a little boy up to drown because I want to get back at your worthless cad father and your mother, because your mother knows that I'm your worthless cad father's lover, and she doesn't care because she knows that her husband is not ever going to leave them for me. So I need to punish them.
And this is still a change from the novel and the previous movie versions, because Nina does it because she wants to get the nephew of her lover out of the way so that he can inherit the money and he can marry her and they can all live happily ever after.
Her lover, by the way, was not a married man, but here Nina is a student. She is involved with the handsome older professor, and this is why so many colleges have rules about fraternization between the older professors and the pretty young co-eds, because the girls are too young and stupid to recognize that they're being taken for a ride. And of course the college professors, the rules apply to them. She's the only one that you can make a close parallel, other than at the very beginning you do also have a handyman on the island, and you do have a cook and manager on the island, but they're not a good approximation for the Rogers at all. Nina Vera is the only character who is a reasonable approximation of what you see in the novel. Everyone else's backstory was changed. Their murders were changed. How they died on the island was changed in the novel. And every other version that we have seen to date, the 10 selected victims of Mr. Unknown died in the order of culpability. If he thought you were less guilty of murder, then you died earlier and easier. But the more guilty he thought you were, the longer it took, the more you suffered mentally, and the more gruesome your death. Here, It's not like that at all. And in fact, Unknown is not a judge. It is Eve Lombardi, who is a policewoman. But she could have killed everyone on that island within a couple hours if they would have gone over to the tap and drunk water, because she had poisoned the water. And they found this out when the dog died. And so nobody drank the water. Nina, who is apparently a botany student, they found the cistern where the water comes from, and she found the floating waterweed, which poisoned all of the water, and that must be really toxic waterweed, but okay. It was strange because it's almost as though Eve Lombardi, policewoman, didn't care how anybody died as long as they suffered and died, because the poisoned water could have killed everybody on that island and they wouldn't have had any idea what was going on, except the dog drank it first. There was at least one deadfall that missed a couple of the people were running around in the jungle, could have killed someone. There was a snake trap, a hit in the ground filled in with leaves, and there was a venomous off-island kind of snake that leaped out and attacked, and that could have happened to anybody. So she did not have any sort of a plan in how she was going to kill them, in any kind of order. She just wanted to kill them.
Right. Now let's go ahead and set this up first. They Were 10 was filmed in 6 parts, 6 hour-long
I would say
episodes.
45 minutes.
45, because the total running time is about 5 hours and 12 minutes.
2 nights for this, folks.
And we saw this over 2 nights, and I must admit the second night was proving hard going for me at times, but I did stay until the end, and I was certainly enthralled by it, but I understand you're better off in 3 nights with 2 episodes each, whatever your schedule is. Certainly don't try binging it all in one night unless you really want to have nightmares afterwards, because I think this is such an intense experience watching this play out, in part because even though we knew the shape of the movie, there were enough changes made, as you said, to the characters, and sometimes they just swap things out. Like you have Eva's last name is Eva Lombardi,
but
she's not Philip Lombard.
She's not Philip Lombard, exactly. We didn't know going in who was who. Up till now, I was able to always match up characters in the novel with characters in the film. I wasn't really able to do that except with Nina and Vera. Their story is so dramatic, and as always, Nina dies last when she finally is able to admit, yeah, I killed that kid because I was angry and jealous and resentful and pissy, and by God, if I can't have you, I'm going to torture you in the best way possible, and that's by murdering your son. Not even your nephew, your son.
Yeah, this was a grim, and it also actually finishes playing out what we had suspected. Christie wrote a slasher flick.
Yes, this is a slasher flick.
And here it's played out. This is the kind of thing you could have had Friday the 13th become, because it's the same thing. Somebody sins, they pay for their punishment.
This is a very, very conservative movie. Every person here could have behaved differently. They could have behaved better, but basically they all were complete slaves to their own impulses and their own emotions, and they didn't care that anybody else existed. Starting at the very... there were a couple people that I would give a little bit of a pass to. How do you want to do this, dear?
We'll have to jump about, because we'll go ahead and do the butler and the maid first, because that's the traditional starting point of the fun. This is filmed on the Isle of Guadalupe, which is a Caribbean island, French-owned island. Of course, they're taken to what they think of is Paradise Island, according to the sign, but it's also known locally as Devil's Island.
Yes, because you have to have a Devil's Island somewhere in the Caribbean. After all, that's where the pirates went.
So we meet what we think of as the butler and the maid, and it turns out it's Miriam, who is not the maid, or not the butler's wife, as it is in previous versions.
Yeah, these are all changes. So you have Miriam. She is the housekeeper, the cook, the manager of the resort, and she, along with Eddy, who is the maintenance. He's in charge of maintenance and a general dog's body, and that's not enough staff for a hotel, by the way.
Yeah, they come onto this island, and think of it as Gilligan's Island, only a lot more gothic and run down.
They show up first, and they start getting set up, and they have been hired, and they're grateful for the jobs. Now, what Miriam did, what you're shown gradually, is she ran a restaurant, and she had a waitress named Marilyn, and she has a son in school who is doing extremely well, and he's going to go places, and she's so proud of him, and you get this impression that she's always done everything for him, and nobody matters but him. And when he comes home triumphant from school, he rapes the waitress.
In the restaurant while
Miriam is away. These are people who have no impulse control whatsoever. They just do what they want because they don't care about you.
He goes off and falls asleep, and Miriam comes to the restaurant back room and the restaurant is closed, by the way.
Yeah, and she discovers Marilyn is just absolutely distraught, and she realizes, oh my God, this is my son, the most precious person in the entire world to me. What do I care about some waitress? Obviously, she led him on, and so she murders Marilyn by electrocuting her, and she gets away with it, but you get the sense this ruined her life. There are a couple of policemen that you see at the beginning and occasionally throughout, and of course they end up on the island at the end. The policewoman, this is Leonie Baptista, as they find out who's on the island, Miriam is one of the names that comes up, and she says apparently she's got a son back in France who does not care what happens to his mother, and he is a drunk who will never go anywhere. Well, he ruined his life, he ruined his mother's life, and his mother murdered someone to save him, and it didn't work.
Actually, we should point out, now that you've mentioned, the two police officers, and I can't pronounce his name offhand, but
Matthew.
We'll call him Matthew.
Yeah.
Matthew and Leonie. And Matthew is an island resident. Leonie is new to the island. Apparently, she grew up in the ghettos of Paris. And these people show up throughout the movie because in the beginning, Matthew encounters Nina. Nina has her purse stolen.
She has her purse stolen. It was purely happenstance because it put Nina on the policeman's radar because her purse was stolen. Leonie gets the purse back later. All the money is gone, of course, but she's got the passport and the phone. And what strikes Officer Matthew is that Nina was distraught and she wanted to get her stuff back. She wanted her passport back. She needed her credit cards. And
she's disappeared.
And she disappeared. They can't reach her. He knows her cell phone. She's got her cell phone. He calls her. He can't reach her. He has no idea what's going on. And when he starts doing a background investigation, maybe I can reach her a different way, she doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And this starts setting mental alarm bells ringing. Officer Leonie is not as suspicious because what she sees is, hot tourist girl, that's what he's going after. But that's not it.
It turns out not to be the case because Matthew has instincts that she hasn't developed yet.
Which is what happened to this woman who was very distraught about all of her stuff being stolen. And why isn't she answering the phone?
Yeah, why isn't she down there at the station finding out what happened to her passport? Because she can't leave the island without it, and yet she's disappeared.
They are already starting to wonder that something is going on. Within a couple days, the guru's wife calls the island wanting to know what happened to him.
This is Vincent Del Piero, who is a famous TV guru, spiritual leader, and he wears braids. He has his hair braided. It's a little cultural appropriation there.
And he's got this kind of Hindu kind of a tunic over pants. He's not wearing a ratty old t-shirt, but he doesn't wear normal clothes either. He wears guru clothes is the best way I can describe it.
It's white, and it looks like an old Nehru jacket, except it's all white, and he puts his hands together and bows to people, and he talks about spirituality and calmness.
And he is, of course, a lying, cheating dog. He loves his wife and his children, and he loves his wealth, but that is not going to stop him from banging every hot girl who comes along.
Right. He has a bachelor pad outside of which there's this hobo who camps out there, and he takes his fans there for shagging sessions, being driven there by his driver, Patrice, who will play a role in the story later.
But getting back to Miriam.
Right.
Miriam is one of the people that, as Officer Leonie and Officer Matthew start finding out what's going on, they find out that she is there by looking for, I guess, travel records of people in and out of the island. And her son doesn't care what's happening to her. And that seems very strange. Again, then you have Eddy, the maintenance man. And you kind of feel for Eddy because he didn't want to kill anyone. He really didn't want to. Whereas everyone else they meant it.
He was in France. He got this job driving a truckload of illegal immigrants from the south of France to the north of France to meet a boat that's going to take him to England.
And he had to be there by a specific time. He wasn't given a lot of time to do it. And of course, it was a super hot day. And he's got a truckload of desperate African refugees. They need water. They need to stop and pee. They need to open up the back doors so that they don't die. And it keeps delaying him. But he is trying to keep them alive. He stops for water. He stops so that he can use the bathroom. He tries to keep the police away from them. He is trying. But at the same time, he's under this enormous deadline, not just so that he gets paid, but if they don't make it to the boat, then they don't go over to England. I don't know what they would do. I guess they end up in some camp. They end up in a jail in Calais.
And he doesn't get paid.
So when his truckload of immigrants die of heat stroke in the overheated truck, he didn't want that to happen. He was trying to make that not happen. He was driving as fast as he could to make it to the boat, and this is to make up for time when he stopped to give them water and to let everybody out for a bathroom break. You feel for him because this was not a deliberate betrayal on his part of any of these people. It was tragic circumstances. So that is Eddy.
We can already talk about Eve because she's the one, we know she's the one who sets it up, but she is a policewoman.
And she talks about how she, because of course you get the computer screen accusing everyone, and this was a change too, but the computer screen said you're all guilty and you're all here to be punished for your crimes, and Eve is the one who stands up, the only one who stands up and says, I let a rape suspect get away because I believed that he was not guilty.
Okay,
and then he murdered someone, and she is the only person who says anything.
There is another point of difference between the book and the series here is that there is a voice that speaks to them, but doesn't directly accuse them of what they actually did. So it's up to each of the suspects here, you might say, to decide how much to share and when.
And so they don't share. They don't discuss it basically until they are forced to. None of these people ever admit guilt until they are absolutely forced to, and sometimes it's only to themselves and to the camera, but you do not have the confession setup that you do in all of the other adaptations I've seen, or the novel, where people have to answer the accusations, because there are no direct accusations made. Everyone there on the island, with the exception of Eve, pretends, I have no idea what you're talking about.
Right.
All of them.
Like then there's the sales representative for solar panels, Gilles.
He, like Eddy, I would be inclined to give him a pass because he murdered another child when they were both kids. They both look to be about, on the cusp of adolescence, say 12 or 13. You're starting to notice girls. He's a fat kid. He's an unwanted kid. He's not one of the cool kids.
He's the son of a police officer.
He's the son of a police officer. He wants desperately to be accepted. You see, he is lonely. He is lonely, and he wants desperately to be accepted by the cool kids who treat him like dirt.
Yeah.
They treat him like dirt. They humiliate him. They shame him in front of the gang and in front of his own father. And he ends up back again with the leader of the gang, and they're on the railroad bridge, the same bridge that he had been held over so that he could see the train coming at him. And you never actually see it, but you know that he pushed him over the railing. The Gilles, as a kid, pushed this other vicious, nasty, bullying boy over the railing who had humiliated him multiple times. And kids will do really stupid-ass stuff, and you never see anything else after that about Gilles' life. So we do not know if he remade his life like, say, Anne Perry, who was involved as a murderess, as she was a teenage lesbian murderess in New Zealand, and you can look up her backstory on Wikipedia. When she got out of prison at age 21, she went to England and changed her name and became a successful person, a real, a fully fledged human being. She never did anything like that again. She turned her life around. She redeemed herself. And we have no idea if Gilles redeemed himself as a person, that he regretted for the rest of his life that he did that he married, that he had children, that, he holds down a job as a solar panel salesman. He made some kind of a life for himself. Mm-hmm. But Eve, our Mr. Unknown, doesn't give a rat's ass because she's going to punish people, and he's someone that she can punish without too many people finding out about it, I guess.
Yeah. So we have Eddy and Miriam, and then Gilles and Eve, and Vincent Del Piero, the guru, and Nina, the student. And then we come to Nelly Nasib.
Yes. Kelly she's very pretty. She is also from the projects. She has a cute, fluffy little dog whom she adores. She adores her cute, fluffy little dog, and the dog is poisoned by the poisoned water. And you never find out what's going on with Kelly, except that she is clearly not very bright. She's remarkably pretty, but she does not come across as being really smart. She is sure they're being filmed for some kind of reality TV show, and she's not wrong about being filmed, by the way, but not in the way that she thinks. Eve eventually uses her naivete and her dumbness against her.
Right, but we do know her backstory about why she's here.
Yes, eventually you learn Kelly's backstory, which is that someone she knew offered her some serious money to get involved with another gang leader, except that she fell in love with him, Sammy, the gang leader, and he fell in love with her, and he treated her so well, and he gave her the dog.
Yeah.
And she adored him, and then when push came to shove, she chose the money over telling Sammy, somebody has it in for you, we have to leave right now, even if we're poor, or telling the truth to the Mr. Big gang leader, yes, I was with him, and the reason why I was with him, and I was told to lie by him right over there, pointing at the other person, and she didn't do that.
Yeah.
She betrayed a man who truly loved her and who probably died a horrible death.
Well, we know they found his charred body, so
yes,
that's a start right there.
Yeah, he died a horrible death, and she took her money. Presumably she got paid, and she's been scraping by ever since, and the only thing she has, of course, is the dog. But she betrayed her lover, someone who loved her in a way that no one else had.
Right. And now we come to Victoria the surgeon.
Victoria the surgeon. Now, she's not
like Dr. Armstrong?
Yes, she didn't murder somebody on the operating table because she was drunk. And she does not have an issue with sex in that she's going to do whatever she wants with whoever she wants. But instead, she is the child of an illegitimate union. Her father, as it turns out, is a famous cardiosurgeon, and he's married to a woman. They have no children at all. Victoria is the only child that they have, and Victoria wants to be a cardiac surgeon, and she goes through medical school. You know, her mother was a poor nurse, and she ends up in her father's clinic asking to be taken on as a doctor, and she is arrogant. Her sin is arrogance, very, very much so, because it isn't just that she wants to impress this man who she has never seen before. She's never met her father before. She just knows him by name and reputation from what her mother told her. She cannot accept being trained with the other doctors. Oh, that's my patient. Why should I be assisting on the operation on this patient? That's my patient. But if you're a surgeon, I mean, even if you go through medical school, and you're an intern, I would think that you should have some practice, and particularly under supervision, before you start suturing people. And her father, maybe it's just because her father does not want to show her any special favors, who knows? But he insists that she work as the second surgeon, not as the boss surgeon on various patients, including her own patients. And then something happens where he's not around, and she is able to take charge and do this special surgery, and she's so proud of herself. And there's a problem. Problems are happening during this surgery, but everything seems to be okay. And the patient dies like within a day.
Right.
And her father looks at her and says, "You didn't suture it right. A beginner's mistake." And she was so arrogant, so proud of her skills, so proud of who she was, that she couldn't learn by practicing as the second or third surgeon on a surgical team. You couldn't tell her. She headed way over into crazy town very early. She is so paranoid. She is convinced first that Kelly, who is obviously not smart enough, is the murderess. She blames everyone but herself, and she is really a difficult, unpleasant person. she would have probably killed other people on the operating table.
No doubt about that. Then there's Xavier, who is the soldier who I thought was going to be the Philip Lombard character, but turns out not to be the case.
No, his closest analogy is probably General Maxwell, because his wife had the affair with his best friend. And he found this out. He never had any idea that his best friend was having an affair with his wife, which also the best friend's wife didn't know, I'm sure, or the best friend's children know. But he found out because his wife was desperate to have a baby. She'd had fertility treatment, and he finally went in to see a doctor about his own fertility and discovered he was sterile. And the next thing that you see is Xavier having his wife say, "I'm pregnant!" And
instead of saying, I'm sterile. I am sterile. We need to have a long, boring talk about our relationship. He immediately is more jealous of who's the lover. Who
is the lover? Because clearly his wife must have a lover, and then he discovers that it's his best friend. They're both sort of like SEALs.
Yeah. They train recruits.
Yes, they're training specialty recruits. This isn't the general rank and file of soldiers. These are the more elite ones. They're doing a hostage training, and he swaps out blank bullets for real ones in a machine gun and I know machine gun isn't right, it's
an automatic rifle.
Yes, an automatic rifle. It's like an M16, whatever the French use. And he swaps out the fake bullets for real bullets.
And positions his best friend at the center of the maze with the hostage.
And he tells the young man, fire at will.
Yes, fire at will. You're the only one alive. It's up to you. Go in there, confront the hostage taker, and fire at him.
And just blast the place. And this young man is somebody, he's not quite as good at it as everyone else, and he's being told what to do, and so he does it. And he's horrified. He's horrified. You see him being dragged off afterwards, after the lover is executed in a hail of bullets, and you've also got someone else carrying on about, I did not load, I know I loaded the M16s correctly. I did this right. I did not make this kind of mistake. So Xavier his wife she divorces him. She's left pregnant by her lover's baby. Her lover's wife is now a widow. The two children are now orphaned, and Xavier has also managed to destroy the life of both the young man who shot the lover in the maze and whoever it was that loaded all of the M16s with the fake bullets. He's destroyed a lot of people's lives. So he goes.
And now we come to Malick.
He seems like such a nice guy. He's an NGO lawyer. He is probably one of the calmest people on the island. He's so nice. He's easy to get along with. He's developing an affair with Nina, as though like with Philip Lombard and Vera. He really likes her. She is very wary, which she should be because of the professor she had the affair with. Very, very gradually, because he was a high-powered lawyer in training, and very gradually you get his story, and it was an accident. He was desperate to finish this law brief and get it to the right person, working overnight and carrying it off to them in the early morning hours, and he hits a kid on a bicycle.
He had a great bit of misdirection here, because all along he has this other guy as a rival, and this other guy tricks him in various ways. He gets him sick to his stomach just before a critical meeting, so while Malick is throwing up in the bathroom, he swoops in with the dossier and says, I've been working with Malick on this, I know this as well as he does, and he gets the credit for it, and we're expecting him to be killed by Malick.
Yes, and that's not what you get.
And that's not what happens.
That's not what happens. The other lawyer...
He's driving off in the middle of the night. Malick is in his car, and the guy had sabotaged Malick's car, so he had to pull over.
He did? I don't remember that.
That's why he stole the car, because his car broke down.
Yes, I thought it was just a really bad luck.
I don't think so. I think it was something in the hole in the engine line. That I don't think it was bad luck. I think the guy sabotaged it. We'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, we don't know. We don't know. We'd have to go back and rewatch it. But he had to go
somewhere.
But everything is set up so that you think Malick is an innocent victim of circumstances, that that it was purely an accident when he killed someone, and then you discover that not only did he run over this kid,
because he had to steal a car, so
He stole a car to run and then ran over this kid by accident in the dark.
Because he was fumbling for his cell phone.
Yes, fumbling for his cell phone.
What a modern problem.
And then he went back to the bar where he stole the car from and was able to pass it off as, oh, here's your car keys, and some 18-year-old who is drunk and having a good time because France won the soccer competition, won the World Cup, and this 18-year-old goes off, and he's picked up by the police shortly thereafter, and it's obvious proof all over his bumpers that he ran over this kid. And so this 18-year-old who has no idea what's going on is accused of a hit-and-run murder, and he commits suicide while he's in the jail. And so Malick has destroyed 2 lives. Both the boy that he hit with the car, because nothing could be more important than this legal case, and the young man whose car he stole and then who gets the blame for the hit and run, plus all of those people's families. So he was a murderer too.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if he would have stopped and called the police after he hit that kid might still have lived, might or might not have lived. And certainly the other young man wouldn't have been involved at all.
Yeah.
And so he is just as guilty.
Because he ends up also quitting after this. He is so horrified by what he did under pressure, in anger and in retribution. And fatigue.
Fatigue and retribution, that he quits everything that he was doing for this super high-powered law firm and goes off to be a low-rent lawyer at an NGO.
And he says,
I wanted to redeem myself. And this is one of the things, again, that was really interesting about They Were 10, is that Eve doesn't care. Yeah. Eve doesn't care that any of these people may have redeemed themselves, because she puts them all on the same level of guilt. Whether it is Vincent the Guru, who not only is a cad and a cheat and a nasty piece of work.
That's right. We didn't tell what his backstory is, because he has his driver, Patrice.
Yes, he kept his driver, Patrice, because he had to get laid by some young cookie, and so he kept his driver, Patrice, whom he belittles on a regular basis about his mother. Patrice's mother dies while Patrice is standing guard in the alley of the bachelor pad while Vincent the Guru is banging some cute acolyte, and his mother dies, and then later on he's humiliated again by Vincent the Guru, until finally he decides to blackmail Vincent the Guru by taking advantage of the fact that Vincent the Guru cannot keep his pants zipped.
Right, he hires these young girls to have an affair with him. At the same time, he takes pictures, and he wants 300,000 euros in cash, or else he's going to release the pictures.
And destroy Vincent's happy life as a well-paid guru and the illusion of his wonderful marriage and his wonderful children.
And his wonderful morality.
Exactly. Vincent strangles Patrice and then frames the homeless guy down in the alley for the crime.
Pad. For the crime.
He's a nasty piece of work, too. They're all, Malick, I would definitely say Malick is guilty, because if he would have stopped and called the police after hitting that kid
and taken the blame,
he wouldn't end up where he was, but he did. But I would have given Eddy, the transport driver of the illegal immigrants, he didn't mean to kill those people. He tried to keep those people alive.
Yeah.
And Gilles, the solar panel salesman, we all do incredibly stupid stuff when we're unhappy pre-adolescence, and should you be blamed your entire life for doing something stupid when you're 12? That's a really high bar, folks.
Yeah.
And then Eve carries on about how evil all these people are.
And how evil the whole world is. That's why she condemns them all, because her backstory informs her attitude.
And the dog gets poisoned. And then you also see her. She murders the man who helped set it up, Jimmy, who is it turns out that when Jimmy's body washes ashore, many of the suspects on the island recognize Jimmy. Jimmy is who got them onto the island in the first place. So she murders Jimmy. Well, okay, he's another bad guy. But she also murders the pilot who flew them to the island. The pilot had nothing to do with this. He was a completely innocent bystander, just doing his job, flying the small plane. You never get one reason, not even one. Nobody says anything about the pilot because, hey, he doesn't count. He's just collateral damage in my quest to rid the world of evil people.
Yeah, which should be, I guess, from Eve's point of view, everybody, because her husband was a painter, a successful painter, but he didn't care about money. He was a wonderful man. He had a halo over his head all the time, and he dressed shabbily, and he had a heart attack.
On what looked like the steps of the of the courthouse in Paris, a big public building surrounded by people, and he's having a heart attack. And apparently everyone in Paris is so jaded that they walk right by a man having a heart attack on the steps, and he died, and his body was left there. And I find that really hard to believe. I really do. Now, if you were tucked away in an alley and one of the dirtier alleys, it will probably take a little bit of time before somebody will call the police. But if you were in broad daylight on what looks like the courthouse steps, somebody would have called security.
Yeah. Even the security guards would have inquired because they wouldn't want to have a bum on their
Exactly.
Their
they wouldn't have had a bum on the steps. So I find that hard to believe. And it's just grossly exaggerated. But then France is a completely secular country, and unless you're a Muslim, who actually have religious beliefs. But the rest of France, they're a completely secular country, and the closer you get to Paris, the more secular you become, until the idea is that people are just meat puppets, and once you're dead, who cares? You have no value whatsoever.
And that's what makes this such a very conservative, almost pro-religious
certainly
movie.
Pro-moral values
Certainly,
movie.
Yeah,
because
any kind of moral values, if they had any of them.
If any of these people had any moral values whatsoever, like do not commit adultery, they wouldn't be there.
Yeah.
They wouldn't be there. I mean, every single man that we saw, with the exception of Malick and Eddy, Gilles we don't know, but Xavier, his wife, cheated on him. Vincent cheated on his wife constantly. Nita had a carrying on an affair with her professor, who cheated on his wife, and apparently did that numerous times.
There's a lovely scene between the wife and Nina in which the wife says, "Yeah, I knew about you screwing my husband. They all do." And he makes promises to all of them. And you know what? He lies. Because I pay for everything, and he always comes home to me. But your services were paid for by my money, which implied that she was a whore. And you could see why Nina was quietly seething.
Yeah, and point. You go all the way back to Miriam, the cook and manager of the Paradise Hotel. She covered up for her son's sexual sins. Her son raped the waitress, and she murdered the waitress rather than let the waitress cause a problem for her son's future career. And her son's future career was ruined anyway. Eddy did his best to keep those people alive, and it didn't work out. Victoria, her sin was arrogance, but if her father had kept his pants zipped rather than having the affair with the nurse, this wouldn't have happened. And of course, he wouldn't acknowledge her existence. So again, you have that sexual sin behind the other sins.
And it's not just the sin of the adultery. It's the abandonment by her father.
Yes, the abandonment. Xavier, again, his wife cheated on him with his best friend. They betrayed every single person in the around their circle. Malick, there was no sex involved, amazingly. The Kelly betrayed her lover.
Yeah.
For money.
Yeah.
Vincent is a cad and a liar. More than half of these people, and all of them, if they would have behaved decently, none of this would have happened.
Yeah. So this is Christie setting herself up as an Old Testament God. This is Christie writing as an Old Testament God.
Well, certainly Eve has set herself up as an Old Testament God, because there is no mercy.
Yeah,
Eve has no mercy whatsoever. When you think about this, as a policewoman, she would have had access to the files of, we know you did it. We can't prove it, but we know you did it.
Right.
Which is how she came up with these names. But she could have chosen people who were, say, more like Vincent and less like Gilles, or I have to look at the list,
or
less
Eddy.
like Gilles, or less like Eddy, who drove that truckload of immigrants.
Yeah.
Of everyone here, they are the two people that I would say had the least amount of guilt, because they did not, none of this was planned. They weren't murderers. It was almost murder by happenstance, but she didn't care. What she was looking for was people she could easily get rid of and not cause questions right away. In fact, Vincent of the group, Vincent was the highest profile.
Right.
And he had his wife come looking for him.
Right. And that was part of the reason why Matthew and Leonie were able to trace, because they encountered the dead pilot. They encountered the story of the dead pilot because the pilot was partying and then drinking champagne that was left behind for him. And it turned out the champagne was poisoned and he died. So there was a case for them to investigate, as well as the reports of the missing people started trickling in, and they're having to try to calculate where the island was that the pilot took them to.
Yes, because there's also Vincent flew himself in a helicopter, and the helicopter was sabotaged, and so the people who own the helicopter would like to have their very expensive piece of equipment back, and so you've got this also. So they get there pretty quickly. Nina has just hung herself, and she is, they find still warm bodies. That's how quickly Officer Matthew and Officer Leonie arrive.
It was close enough that they made it a very tense climax, because they get there on time. Nina is still alive, although how she managed to run off into the jungle with a heavy rope
and throw it over a tree 40 feet over her head.
Over her head, and be able to kill herself in time that was a really efficient hanging that she did.
That's one of the things that with And Then There Were None, whichever one you watch, you really have to wonder about how the person, in this case Eve or Justice Wargrave or whoever it is, how on earth they managed to run around this island and kill people without being noticed. But when you are watching, you won't notice or ask this question.
There's another element we haven't talked about, is because when Eve goes out on her killing spree, she is dressed.
Yes, where does she hide her clothes?
She has this long black robe and a black mask.
Like one of those morph masks, so that it
looks
really creepy.
I don't think it looks like anything. It's not like, we're not talking a hockey mask here, something iconic.
No, but it's like having I've seen them in Halloween costume catalogs. It's dark enough so that all of your facial features are completely obscured, because it is black, but you can still see through it pretty well. And she's got this long hooded poncho that covers her up completely. And where does she put it? Some of the murders were pretty basic, where you're being stabbed, you're being shot, you're being poisoned. But others of them were rather more, I really had to question this, like Xavier was killed with poison gas. But they're in his room.
That looked like something out of Gilligan's Island, with lots of louvered windows, lots of air spaces running. And we didn't even see him there, because the last we saw of him, he found a spring on the island.
Yes, and he had plenty of time to get that toxic gas out of his system. And I don't see how you could have had toxic gas killing him in his cabana room anyway, because the ventilation, you might as well have been outdoors. That's how good the ventilation is.
Well, and then there was Vincent's death, when he seats himself in the middle of the room as if he could see behind him, because of course he gets a hatchet in the back of the head.
Yes, why didn't he sit with his back to the wall? If you're worried about somebody coming up behind you, you sit with your back to the wall. You put the chair right up against the wall so you can see what's coming at you. And there were moments like this where you're thinking, this is stupid.
Yeah, I'm afraid so. But this over 5.5 hours roughly, where you're getting long stories, because they'll dip into a backstory. They'll dip into Nina's story 5 or 6 times, progressing further each time. So it takes its time telling all the stories and building the tension. And in the way that they set this up, and of course, they're all freaking out on the island. They're all accusing each other. There's a torture scene with
Xavier and Eddy, and they're all sure that somebody else did it. The Victoria is completely batshit crazy about Kelly. She decided early on that it has to be Kelly. Xavier decides early on that it has to be Eddy, and of course they are wrong, and they are wrong, and they are wrong, and they are wrong, and they make their own problems worse. Yep. Every one of them makes their problems far worse than it otherwise would have been, because they simply cannot cooperate, even to the point of Gilles apparently steals the bottled water early on and hides it, rather than rationing it out. They cannot cooperate. They don't cooperate. None of them cooperate with each other. Malick and Nina come the closest, but Nina is so wary and damaged that she can't accept that someone might be nice to her.
Yeah.
And Kelly accepts everything that Eve tells her, but Kelly isn't really very smart. And Victoria, who has set herself up as this wonderful, incredible surgeon, and look at what a great person that I am, she's one of the crazier ones. Her arrogance really has gotten to her, where she cannot accept that maybe she needed to learn and practice before she did careful, intricate, and unusual operation on a patient whom she then killed with a beginner's mistake in the suturing.
Yeah. Now, all this is part of their character, so I don't find that nearly as off-putting, because this is people's characters, and they're deficient characters, and
boy, are they. These are not people that you would ever want to have on your team, because they are not team players in any way, shape, or form. None of them.
But the thing did get me about the boat, because they do find, overgrown in the jungle, a damaged rowboat that they could actually fix up and take off the island. And after they know that somebody is trying to kill them, after the storm passed over and they have buckets of water, fresh water that they could drink.
Which remember, Eve sneaks back and
overturns all the buckets.
But they fight again. They fight constantly.
And they find the boat, but they don't keep somebody watching the boat full time. And of course, the boat is set on fire. And it's like these people just could not learn. They could not learn and could not think. And like you say, they are all fighting each other. They're crazed from lack of water. They're crazed from lack of sleep. They're crazed from the stress, of course, of who's going to get it next. Is it going to be me? My sins have finally come back to haunt me. This is a slasher flick.
If people tell you Agatha Christie writes cozies, well, no, actually she doesn't. And this is the prime example. Every single person on that island deserved it, and they all got it.
And she wrote this in 1939.
Yes.
long before Jason, long before Nightmare on Elm Street, long before Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
and it was, if you're going to watch, and then there were none, or 10 little Indians, or 10 little soldiers, or whatever you want to call it, this is a really good version. And this one, like the Japanese version, really stays close to the novel, not in terms of character backstories or exactly how people died or the order in which they died, but the idea that these 10 people are going slowly crazy, and none of them ever learn, except in this case Kelly, none of them ever learn who the puppet master is, and the police have to work it out after the fact. And in fact, that is something they did a little different here, which is Officer Matthew actually sees Eve in her black slasher garb, and she takes off the mask and then says, they all deserved it, and then she walks into the sea and drowns herself. So he actually sees her.
And of course they have the videotapes.
And they have all the videotapes because she had to, and I really wonder where the generator was that was running the electricity for this place, because somebody would have to keep putting gasoline in the generators in order to keep it running, because this is where the electricity is coming from, because I guarantee you they are not getting enough electricity from a few solar panels in order to run all of this.
Well, I'm sure the professor worked up some coconut windmills that are powered by the ocean breezes to keep the batteries going.
I guess that must be it. The all of those little quibbles, such as how on earth did you manage to race across the island at top speed from one side to the other while nobody was looking, so that you could rearrange the creepy statues at the altar and light all those candles? How did you do it that quick?
Yep.
You should never ask those questions
until long afterwards. Well, but this was it was definitely worth watching. It was
absolutely.
A great version.
The Japanese one is the closest to the novel, and this would be second. Sarah Phelps was very close to the novel, except that, again, she took the stage section where Vera finds out who the puppet master is. Remember, in the novel, none of those people on the island ever learn who did it to them. But here, and that's what happened here, none of the people on the island, with the exception of Kelly and a little bit of Victoria, and for only a moment, and they never learn why or any of the backstory.
Yeah. So this will be the last version from France that we're going to see, and we'll move on to, I'm not sure, maybe we'll move on to India after this?
Sure, because we've got 2 Indian films, and then we've got 2 Russian films, and then we have Chinese, and we have to go back to the beginning. So there are some movies that we watched a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, but we have to redo them so that I can for various technical reasons, we have to redo them.
Yeah.
This is the last of the French.
Yeah. And it was certainly a high point to end this on.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. I'm looking forward to seeing the Bollywood version of And Then There Were None, and then the Russian version.
Yeah.
Heaven only knows.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it as well. And I hope you all are out there as well. Be sure to go to peschelpress.com if you want to learn more about our annotated books, as well as our appearance schedule.
And also remember that all of these reviews are going to become a book, Agatha Christie, She Watched.
So be on the lookout for that. We'll let you know more as soon as we do. So next time, we'll see you at the movies.
Thanks so much for joining us.
Agatha Christie, She Watched is Teresa Peschel and Bill Peschel, produced by Bill Peschel. New episodes come out every week wherever you stream your content. If you enjoyed this podcast, you can help support us by going to anchor.fm/mystery and leaving a 5-star rating and review, and by helping to spread the word. To advertise on Mystery She Watched, email Peschel at peschelpress.com. All questions and comments can be emailed to Peschel at peschelpress.com. And thank you for listening.